My name is Lauren. I'm a 36-year-old woman working from home. My husband, Daniel, and I got married 3 years ago. At that time, we were both 33 and wanted to have children, so we decided to see a doctor considering fertility treatments. The results showed no issues, which was a relief, but despite waiting patiently, we had no luck conceiving a baby. As we were about to give up, Daniel said, "But my mom insists we must have a successor." I sighed at his confused words. Daniel is generally a good husband, but he has a tendency to be a bit of a mama's boy and always agrees with whatever his mother says. I don't particularly like my mother-in-law. Daniel is the eldest son and has a younger sister, but my mother-in-law adores Daniel, practicing favoritism to an extreme. His sister didn't like this, so she left home early. Daniel's job involves a lot of transfers, but when we got married, he was working near his parents' home. When we were getting married, he warned me that he might get transferred, but I felt as long as we were together, I could live anywhere. However, when we rented a house near his parents' home, my mother-in-law would often come over to our house on Daniel's days off, and even while I was working from home, she would find excuses to drop by and interfere with my work, criticizing my way of doing laundry or cleaning. It's downright annoying. Additionally, every time we meet, she would ask about having a grandchild. Of course, it has to be a boy. We don't need a girl. Her presence stresses me out. I tried explaining the situation to Daniel and asked him to talk to his mother, but no matter how many times I tell him, all he says is, "My mom just wants to get along with you, Lauren," which is overly optimistic. It's not helpful to stress out someone you're trying to get along with. Originally, I was drawn to Daniel because of his optimistic character, a trait I lack in, and I felt that we balanced each other out in many areas, but we can't bridge this gap. However, 6 months ago, Daniel's job transfer was finalized and we were finally able to move away from his parents' house. Our new place is farther away from my parents' home. Although there are only farm fields around my parents' house, Daniel's new workplace is in a relatively prosperous area, similar to a regional city in Nebraska, with well-developed public transportation and infrastructure. Moreover, it takes less than an hour away from my parents' home by car. Once we moved, my stress was almost gone. I could concentrate on my work and our life became comfortable. Then, just the other day, I found out I was pregnant. Daniel and I hugged each other in joy. Being of advanced age, I do have some concerns, but this is the pregnancy we've been longing for. When we told his parents, my mother-in-law's first words were, "It's a boy, right?" Even when Daniel said we didn't know the gender yet, she insisted it had to be a boy. However, the baby turned out to be a girl. When my mother-in-law found out, she called me when Daniel was not around and said, "You're really useless. What did you marry into this family for?" Whether it was because of hormonal imbalances or I was emotionally unstable, I broke down crying. When Daniel came home and saw me crying, he got mad when I told him what happened and yelled, "Are you saying my mom is in the wrong?" And I ended up crying even more. Regardless, Daniel still cares for my health and helps me with the household chores, so he's a good husband as long as my mother-in-law isn't involved. So I was able to deliver the baby safely. I came back home a month after giving birth in my hometown. Daniel came to pick me up. I got into his car and we headed to back home after a long while. Surprisingly, my mother-in-law was there. I didn't expect her to come to see her granddaughter, but she came anyway. I had a bad feeling about this. Yet Daniel was oblivious and cheerfully said, "My mom came to help." And then, while my husband was in another room soothing our daughter, my mother-in-law pulled out a box of cake from the refrigerator. "This is to celebrate your childbirth. I'm sure you didn't get to enjoy any good food while you were out in the countryside for your postnatal recovery, did you?" I was annoyed by the way she said it, but tried to let it slide. "This cake costs $500, she exclaimed, handing me the box. $500? I was taken aback. I had never heard of such a pricey cake before. Nodding, my mother-in-law urged me to open it. I was curious to see what a $500 cake would look like. Excited, I placed the box on the table and opened it. But I was slightly disturbed by the smug look on my mother-in-law's face. The cake that came out of the box was not what you would expect for $500. The whipped cream was dried out, and while there were fruits on top, they were clearly canned oranges. I wondered which bakery would sell such a shoddy cake for $500. I love sweets, and I can enjoy any cake regardless of its price. Yet, this was the first time I felt such disappointment the moment I opened a cake box. However, the story with my mother-in-law's cake didn't end there. I couldn't believe my eyes. As I looked up from the cake, there she was grinning. "So, how's the $500 cake?" she asked. At that point, I lost my temper and threw the cake, box and all, into the trash. "Please leave," I shouted. Surprised by my outburst, my husband rushed into the living room. Before I could say anything, my mother-in-law started crying to my husband. "Lauren is being so mean." Then she pointed at the trash can. My husband looked at it and became furious. "You, what the hell have you done? That was a cake my mom went through all the trouble to make." As I lost the opportunity to mention the supposed $500 cake, my mother-in-law chimed in. Yes, that's right. I made that cake for you, so it's worth $500. Ah, so that's what it was. Of course there's no way such a cake would cost $500. Even at $50, no, even at $5, I wouldn't buy it. Everything finally made sense. There's no way any bakery would approve such a disrespectful cake. As I was processing the situation, my husband yelled out, "Lauren, apologize to Mom." It seems my husband is always on my mother-in-law's side no matter what. As I was standing there in shock, I heard our daughter, who I thought was put to sleep, crying, so I rushed to her. There was some commotion on the other side of the door, but right now, my daughter was my priority. When I finally got her to settle down and return to the living room, I found a note saying that they had gone out to eat and that I should reflect on my actions. I was stunned. I wondered if I could return to live here with my husband, but I didn't know if it would be right to run crying to my parents, but I had nowhere else to go. As I was thinking about this, I glanced at the trash can where I had thrown the cake away. It was just as I had left it, untouched. On a whim, I decided to take a picture of it. When I called my parents and told them the whole story, my father said he would come to pick me up right away. I felt sorry for my newborn daughter. We had to move again. But for the both of us, it was better than staying here. My husband, who was supposed to be out for a meal, didn't return home as quickly as expected. My father arrived first. As my father was loading our belongings into his car, my husband and my mother-in-law finally came home. They seemed surprised to see my father there and got enraged when they saw him carrying my stuff. "Where are you going? Relying on your parents again, huh? You just run to your parents the moment something goes wrong." His words were harsher than usual. It seemed he had been drinking. His face was red and he smelled of alcohol. Seeing his state, I lost my temper. "You went drinking after leaving us, your wife and your newborn daughter at home? Right now, I don't want to be in the same space as you two. That's why I decided to rely on my parents." Then, my mother-in-law, who also smelled of alcohol, interjected. "Scary, good riddance, a daughter-in-law like you." Her comments always got on my nerves. "Indeed, as you wish, I'll take my daughter and go, so please enjoy your time alone with my husband, Daniel." When I said this, my husband made a confused face, but I ignored him and got in my father's car. It seems like my father was trying to keep his emotions in check, not intervening. The next day, my husband contacted me. "Where are you? I was surprised when I woke up and found you gone." Oh right, I had forgotten because he doesn't usually drink, but he tends to forget things when he does. I sighed. "Don't you remember? You left your hungry wife and daughter at home to go out to eat with your mother, and then you came back drunk. After being treated and spoken to like that, I couldn't stay there anymore." While my husband sounded surprised and flustered, I could hear my mother-in-law in the background, and my anger from yesterday returned. "So your mother stayed over? I won't be going back to a home where such a rude person is staying." "What do you mean?" His voice lowered. "She might be your mother, but she's a stranger to me. I'm exhausted from childbirth and don't have the energy to be considerate of others. Who do you think was the cause of our infertility? It was because your mother kept visiting and stressing me out. Otherwise, there's no way I would have gotten pregnant so soon after we moved and she stopped visiting. I was relieved not to see your mother's face, but when I came back home with our daughter, your mother was there and I just can't stand this." Though I knew I was saying some hurtful things, with all the resentment I had been holding back, I couldn't stop myself. And then my husband shouted over the phone, "You're the worst! Come back right now and apologize to my mom." When he said that, it felt like time had stopped for a moment. The next words that came out of my mouth were, "What?" As if to mock him. I continued, "The reason why I'm here with our child is because of your mother's request." When I said this coldly, my husband let out a confused sound. "What? What do you mean?" "Your mother didn't want our daughter. She's always been saying that, hasn't she? She wanted us to have a son. Well, I didn't know how serious she was, but I was sure when I saw that cake." "Cake?" "Didn't you see the chocolate plate?" "Huh?" "The chocolate plate on the cake, or did you not even look at the cake itself?" I had hit the nail on the head. The trash can where I threw out yesterday's cake was still empty, so it was probably still the way it was yesterday. With that in mind, I instructed my husband to go look in the kitchen trash can. "But there's nothing in here." "Did she get rid of the evidence in the middle of the night? Then why don't you ask your mother what was written on the chocolate plate and where she threw it away?" Then I could hear their exchange on the other end of the phone. She was denying knowledge of any chocolate plate, suggesting that I was being delusional. She stubbornly refused to reveal where she discarded it. So, how will my husband respond? "She's saying she doesn't know anything about any plate." Even my husband sounded a bit hesitant, a bit weak. Right, wouldn't it be awful if Daniel saw that plate? Even if it's a lot of trouble, you got rid of it before he saw it, right? To get rid of the evidence. I could hear my husband's voice darken. In the background, behind my confused husband, I heard my mother-in-law's voice. "Why don't you hurry up and come home? Tell her to entertain me. She's a really useless daughter-in-law." At her words, my husband finally seemed to be attempting to rein in his mother. "I'm going to hang up and send a text. Maybe you and your mother should read it together. Contact me again when you are ready to talk." After saying that and ending the call, I sent all the photos of the cake and plate to my husband. Within 30 minutes, my husband called back and said he would be heading over here right away. I stopped him. My father-in-law should be getting there soon. Stay there. With that, I hung up. In reality, my own father had been so enraged by my husband's behavior yesterday that he had contacted my in-laws. He had reported everything to my father-in-law. Unaware of this, my father-in-law had apologized profusely and said that he would go to my husband and have a talk. By evening, my husband and in-laws arrived at my parents' house. As soon as he arrived, my husband bowed deeply to me in apology. I don't know anything about what's been happening or what happened this time. I didn't know my mother said such things to Lauren. Looking at my seemingly repentant husband, I felt myself growing cold. Don't you think it's too late to say you didn't know? Didn't we have this conversation when we were living in our previous home? Despite that, you sided with your mother saying she just wanted to get close with me and did nothing to change her attitude towards me. At my words, my husband started to turn pale. Plus, you always said that your mom absolutely wanted us to have a son. What's that about? Are you always going to do whatever your mother says? Since you chose your mom over your wife, I guess you don't need me, do you? My husband turned pale and clung to me. That's not it. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. Then, what did you mean? At my retort, my husband was at a loss for words and fell silent, looking down. Just as I thought, Daniel, you chose your mom over your own wife and daughter. A mother obsessed with her eldest son and a mama's boy. I should have realized sooner. It's no wonder your sister left home early. With a sigh, my husband retorted, I'm not some mama's boy. I care about you too. Then, could you really sever all ties with your mother? I fired back. At that, he fell silent. When I sighed, my mother-in-law, who was brought here by my father-in-law, yelled out, How can you say such a thing? Daniel and I are mother and son. We can never sever our ties. His father tried to calm her down, but she just wouldn't stop. To be frank, I never really liked you. I wanted a younger wife for Daniel. Really? In that case, I'll sever ties with you right now. I have divorce papers ready. If we divorce, then you and I can be strangers. Hearing this, my husband's face turned pale as he looked at me. I don't want to maintain a relationship with someone who would write these nasty things on my cake plate. Saying this, I pulled out my phone and showed everyone the picture of the plate that read, Take your daughter and leave. Upon seeing this, his father, perhaps not having been fully informed, angrily shouted at his wife, turning blue in the face. What you did to your own daughter, you did it again to our daughter-in-law? I was shocked to hear this. Apparently, his mother had once served a birthday cake to her daughter with the words, I don't need a daughter written on it, leading to their estrangement. Just how much she must hate women. Perhaps she thought she could get more attention by excluding the women close to her. Indeed, her son Daniel was acting just as she expected. When I handed my husband the divorce papers, he started making excuses. We just had a child. We shouldn't be getting a divorce. My mom just went a little too far this time. She was just jealous of you. Try to understand. Is that what you came here to say? I thought for sure you were going to tell me you were severing ties with your mother and coming back home. I'm never returning to that house. Then my father-in-law, who had been silent and pale-faced, spoke up. Daniel, sign the divorce papers. I'm done with this family. When I get home, I'm divorcing your mother too. What? His mother spun around at these unexpected words. I've thought about it a few times before, but I thought it was too late for a divorce and that I just needed to be patient. But now that I see you doing the same thing to another woman, I've reached my limit. Sign our divorce paper and leave our house. Begrudgingly, my husband signed the divorce papers under his father's direction. As a consolation, I received around $10,000 from his father. At first, I declined, but I accepted gratefully when he assured me it would be deducted from his wife's assets. My ex-in-laws really did get divorced, and his mother seemed to rely on Daniel, but he refused to take her in, blaming her for his circumstance. Indeed, the family fell out. His mother, who hadn't worked since they got married, lost all the money she received as property division after investing it all in cryptocurrency, which someone had recommended to her as an easy way to make money. I received child support from Daniel every month, and now I'm raising our daughter with the help of my parents. I'm so happy to see our daughter growing up and doing great.